Well, welcome to another episode of the Tech Transfer Podcast. I'm Dave Brown. I'm here with Matt Sederberg, who is the Chief Strategy Officer for CoreForm. He's a serial entrepreneur who's been a serial tech transfer entrepreneur, our favorite kind. And so it'll be really interesting to talk to him about tech transfer issues. So Matt, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Tell us about your background.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me on. So my entrepreneurial journey probably started when I was a BYU student back in 2003. So I was studying economics, and I intended to get a PhD in economics, maybe become a professor, but my dad was a BYU professor of computer science and had invented actually a whole bunch of really interesting technologies. And someone from the BYU Marriott School was touring the university looking for interesting ideas from professors to encourage participation in the BYU business plan competition. And he came across my dad.
Was that the Millennium Venture competition at that time? I think it was.
Maybe it may have been even earlier than that. I can't remember it was, but and he came across my dad, and he had all these different technologies, and he had one technology that was like a way of printing your entire genealogy on one single piece of paper, and like one that helped like 2D cartoon makers get the in-between shots. And then he had another technology called T-Splines, and all three of these technologies at the time turned out to like take the first three slots in the first BYU idea competition of the year. And so my dad told me that this student had come over and asked if I wanted to be involved as they prepared for the business plan competition. And that sounded like a lot of fun to spend time with my dad. And so we put together a business plan, and we started like winning all these competitions with this T-Splines technology, which was a new technology that can improve computer animation.
And it was improving the curves on 3D models, right? Was that what it was doing?
Yeah, it could just help you create more complex 3D shapes easier that looked really good. And so we ended up winning, I think, $10,000 from a business cumulative from business plan competitions, and thought that would be enough to start the company. And then end up growing it and selling it, and then have started another one.
And did you co-found with your dad? Was he a co-founder?
Yeah, so he stayed at the university the entire time, but we were co-founders, and we hired his grad students to work there as well.
Yeah, and that was before I was here, but I know your dad, Tom, who's a great guy. And even later, he invented another technology in the area that we did sell to a company as well.
Yeah.
But so T-Splines, so had you planned to be an entrepreneur? You said you were thinking PhD track, professor. Was this just kind of a surprise turn for you?
I mean, I always thought it'd be fun to have like a gap to go into the business world before I resumed academia. And then it's not been a gap. It's been my whole career.
Yeah. And then the one you're at now, so you did that, and that company exited, I think 2012 or thereabouts.
Yep.
That's all right. And then after that, and a fun fact I know about you is that you got that mentoring during the business plan competition here, and later you donated money back to the school to repay what they had given you so they could do it with someone else. Pretty classy about that. So, but then you went on, and now you're with CoreForm. Like you said, Chief Strategy Officer, you were CEO, you shifted roles recently, and that's a company also that came out of BYU. It's Michael Scott from engineering invented this technology, and it's kind of in the ballpark. You're doing 3D modeling. So do you mind telling us about that just a little bit?
Yeah. So T-Splines in a small way revolutionized computer design in the end, which was how to design shapes to be manufactured. This current company, CoreForm, and our IC geometric analysis technology is kind of revolutionizing an adjacent industry, which is computer-aided simulation. So you take the CAD model and you simulate like how would a car experience a crash, or what happened to your cell phone when you drop it. And so at CoreForm, we have kind of groundbreaking technology that allows you to really accelerate how long it takes to set up those simulations. So we work with large automotive and defense contractors that it can take them weeks to prepare a model to run a simulation, and the result that we're seeing is it can take just hours with our stuff.
Wow. And so a lot of people would hear that and say, well, what's great about simulating a car wreck is that you're not wrecking an actual car. But that's actually a trivial part of it, right? The important part is speed to market. If you can save time, that's just valuable, right?
Yeah. So like one of the car companies we're working with, I mean, there's so much pressure in this industry to accelerate time to market. It usually takes 3 years to from my sketch to car to market, and they want to go down to 2 years. So when you get a process like what simulation is today, and how it takes weeks to set up a model for simulation, and by the time it's finally set up, the CAD design has changed, and so the simulation doesn't really even matter because they have to like re-prepare the mesh to simulation. So having that all in perfect sync is really, really valuable.
Okay. Super interesting. So you've done a couple different companies that were out of the university tech transfer. I see lots of our entrepreneurs like you will come back for more technologies in the future. So you kind of have an expertise at working with tech transfer. Do you see that as an expertise, or is it kind of like any other tech startup?
That's a good question. I mean, it's also at CoreForm, we've licensed technology from national labs as well. And so it absolutely has been helpful, yeah, to kind of build on that experience. And it has turned into kind of a recurring theme in my career.
Well, good. So if someone were working with tech transfer for the first time, what are some tips that would be helpful for them to know?
Yeah, for me, I guess, yeah, early in my career, I was always looking for the best deal I'd possibly get. And it felt like if we left anything on the table, I was a failure. But I just come to learn to always look for a win-win. Like if you're partnering with someone, I mean, you should leave something on the table, but you should clearly be better off, like both parties. And so
Yeah.
the way to really understand that, though, was to understand the maturity of the technology. Often one party misunderstands the work required to actually take the product to market. And so as an entrepreneur, it's kind of, I view it as my job to work with the tech transfer house to help them understand, like, we often talk about in terms of technology readiness levels. So like NASA came up with this idea from like 0, or like 1 was you had a good idea. And then like 2 is you published a research paper. 4 means you have beta software. 9 means you can use it on a mission critical part. And usually when you're licensing technology transfer, it's in the low tier levels, and communicating from as an entrepreneur that like all the work that needs to go into to actually creating a product, demonstrating product market fit. There's always like wrong turns that you take can really help maybe identify the appropriate terms for those deals.
That's fantastic. That's a key issue that people don't automatically know. And some people will come and say, well, what's a technology you have at the university that's ready for the market right now? And for it to be that, it would probably, in most cases, be software, but small software, like simple software. What you're doing is like highly technical engineering software. And that's going to be, I assume, whatever was developed at BYU before CoreForm licensed it has been rewritten completely. It's been developed like way beyond that, right?
Oh yeah, it's several times. And in fact, yeah, the original idea, I don't think any of that code's left anymore. But at the high level picture, absolutely, has stayed consistent. But the technology, yeah, you rewrite that so many times as you try to find the right fit.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think about what are we giving people? What is the value from tech transfer when someone gets a technology here? There are some things like with T-Splines, that's a good example. That was a valuable patent, right? Like once that was protected, that was inherently valuable. So there is that. But also it's kind of like the initial part of the product, and then you're going to raise money on that and then develop into something else. Is that a realistic way to explain it?
Yeah. I mean, the patent in the case of T-Splines was extremely valuable. And when we exited that company, we would not have gotten nearly the exit price without that patent. So that's really important. And in the case of CoreForm, it just provided a way for us to launch and have a continuity from like my business partner, Mike Scott's ideas as a professor, and actually be able to kind of mature that before it was time for him to leave. So just, again, it would have been inconceivable to start without those tech transfer agreements.
Mm-hmm. And Mike is now the CEO of CoreForm, right? And he's gone full time into that role. So that's worked out really well. So in his situation, it was contemplated that there would be sponsored research here at the university. So the relationship isn't just licensing the technology. What other interactions are there?
Yeah. So again, in the case of CoreForm, we were often able to, so we chose to fund our company through a lot of the SBIR grants and contracts, and in some STTRs, which is like SBIR, where you have to send some money to a university or research institution. So we were able to fund quite a bit of BYU research through a number of those grants. And again, having that tech transfer agreement really allowed that to be a win-win.
Yeah. And so it does seem like, and I don't know, this is just anecdotal information I get from people like yourself, but the SBIR grants seem to be easier to get than many federal grants, like academic grants, but only you have a commercial partner who's working on it with you. Is that fair?
I've never sought just academic grants. So
yeah.
so the winner with SBIR is across like all the agencies is about 18%. We, yeah, but when you have like a really strong like value proposition, which I think we're able to do with CoreForm with the technology coming out of BYU, I wonder it's around 70%. So it makes like the commercial story in the business, the commercial story and the technology, if they both marry up, then it can really increase your odds of getting that type of funding.
Yeah, and then there's potential follow-on funding and things.
Yeah.
So going through the process, you've done T-Splines, now you're with CoreForm. What this time around, what's surprising? What are new things that you've learned from doing it a second time?
That's a great question. I think it's really nice to be able to do it a second time, because the first time I was 24 years old and I just felt so naive. So it's like everything I came across was just, no one had taught me that in school. And so just going the second time, so much has been a lot easier. I think something that hasn't honestly been surprising is just how long it takes to commercialize, especially deep technology. In these spheres that we play in, it just takes years. It's almost like a pharmaceutical where you have this idea, you believe it's going to pan out, but then actually implementing everything just takes a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were just talking about that around here today, that these are long-term plays with potentially great upside. I mean, that's what we're hoping for. But for several years, CoreForm's been named fastest growing company in the country in its niche, right? I guess in CAD design, is that?
Yeah.
Rank those. So you've done a huge amount of hiring. I know that's an issue that you've been very involved with. What are some of your thoughts on finding the right people for something very difficult like this?
That is, these are good questions, Dave. I think.
Sorry, I'm a little off script, but this is just interesting.
No, these are the best kinds of interviews. I think for us, again, we're so technical that's one of my. I mean, the vast majority of our employees have PhDs in these areas that we're in, so that like maybe 90% of them. And so that limits our hiring pool. But we are the preeminent commercial player, and there's probably been like 4,000 research papers published on isogeometric analysis. So anyone that's researching, unless they want to career as a professor, CoreForm would be their dream job, would be to come here. So we've been able to provide a chance for people to do really cutting edge research and development without needing to worry about tenure. And then I guess outside of that, which is the mechanics of running the business, that we honestly do a lot of contracting before we hire. So I build out like with the SBIR program, one thing that not everyone knows is that every time you win a grant, so through the series of phases, you can get up to over about almost $2.5 million. And there's always like special earmarked money for go to market. And that's like $50,000 per grant, and you can get a lot of leverage out of that. And so that's how I've kind of grown the business side, as our technology is developed is through using a lot of consultants that have a lot of niche expertise.
Okay. That's interesting. And so when you're thinking of those market entry sorts of issues, from the start, did you know that you want to do like simulating car accidents and things like this, or did you have to feel around a bit to see where you wanted to
go? So automotive crash is always kind of the glamour problem with finite element analysis or isogeometric analysis. So that's the most difficult problem. And on HPCs, like that's always the one that takes all of the most expensive compute is automotive crash. And so that was actually what initially drove me to partner with Mike Scott to form CoreForm. Was Ford encouraged us to start a company because they needed a better solution. But we found all sorts of interesting applications. So 3D printed parts, for instance, 3D printing's, of course, risen popularity, but it's not yet widely used for mission critical parts in aerospace, because you can imagine, you see all the bad news that Boeing's having just with these, like they don't want to put anything that increases their risk. And so a 3D printed part, unless they're completely certain that it will behave well, there's no way they're going to put it on a plane. And they simulate that with traditional technology, and our technology is the best bet to be able to do complicated simulations on that. And finding niches like that where current technology just cannot solve it accurately has been some of the best entry points for us.
Okay, and so the industry was asking for the solution, and you got connected to Mike. What happened first? Did you know Mike and then you're looking for opportunities, or did you come out the other direction?
Yeah, Mike and I actually met during, actually, he was one of my dad's students during T-Splines. So even the very beginning of my first company, Mike was in touch with us and was encouraging us to consider doing acid geometric analysis. And I didn't think it was ready yet. And I went to work at Autodesk, and then I think it was like almost 10 years after Mike and I first started talking that I started hearing enough business demand that I felt like the technology was mature enough that we could chase it with the company.
Super interesting. That's so typical for us. I think that your dad will have seen this, and then obviously Mike, where we have high-tech solutions. Our professors are going after the hardest problems, and so it's often 10 years early. So essentially, you wait around and see, okay, is the market actually ready for this? So, well, that's great. So in terms of intellectual property, that's a lot of what we do in tech transfer. Like we said, the T-Splines patent ended up being very valuable and critical for the company. What is your view of intellectual property, and what kind of strategies do you think make sense?
Yeah, so we have a number of patents at CoreForm, and that when it comes to either winning SBIRs or being acquired in a high tech area, those are so valuable.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's our main approach. I think we do some trade secrets as well, but a critical part of managing IP, though, is if you do go the route of getting government grants and contracts, is always making sure that the IP is buttoned down with each of those monetary awards. That almost killed the acquisition of T-Splines, as there was some question about whether we actually owned all of the IP or if the government owned it from some of the grants. And so we were able to clear that up, but it's been top of mind for me every contract we have to make sure that that's buttoned down now.
Yeah, I will say in tech transfer, part of the job is to make sure that the patent portfolio doesn't get too encumbered, that you don't have so many federal grants or so many other situations that it's just too complex for an acquirer.
Yeah.
Super interesting. The in terms of like, I've dealt with, say, in the aerospace industry, companies where like on campus, maybe we would file one patent to protect a part, but they're filing 100 patents around it. They want to create this huge thicket. How aggressive does it make sense for you to be with patenting?
Yeah, we have that debate. We're probably somewhat in the middle, where, yeah, I think we do create maybe a small thicket, but it's not. I think we focus more on just the key enabling technologies that are required fundamentally.
And have you had any, well, to the extent you can talk about them, have you had any patent regret or IP regrets where you look back and like, we should have done this differently in either company?
I think in retrospect with T-Splines, we had like our core initial technology that was really valuable. And then we were always doing additional R&D to pursue even bigger and better things. But when we sold it was just that very first piece. That was all that we'd been able to commercialize. And so all the additional effort, I mean, it was interesting research, but it wasn't grounded in ROI from a business standpoint that we could realize. And I think at CoreForm, again, when you hire top-notch PhDs, it's always a tension of pushing the field versus being responsive to business opportunities. In a way, that's what I think makes companies like CoreForm unique, is that they can wear both hats. But I don't know that there's regret so much as just a constant tension of developing IP and publishing versus just pushing the business forward.
Yeah, and one thing along those lines that we see is for many professors, your dad was a very like down to earth, easy professor to work with when he was here. So I'm guessing that wasn't too hard. Plus family relations, right? But many professors have an idea of what product they want their IP to create, but ultimately, once it gets in the hands of a company, it's just going to go where the market wants it, right?
Yeah, no, and with my dad too. Yeah, it was. So we initially thought this was like T-Splines was going to revolutionize animation. And after a few years, we developed a product, a plugin for company software called Maya that was used at DreamWorks and Pixar, and just no one bought it because the academic problem that my dad solved that really was a beautiful solution did not map well to an industry need. And so we ended up completely pivoting and going into industrial design and CAD, where there was a good product market fit. But to your point, I'm glad that he was willing to acknowledge like,
right,
time to pivot.
Yeah. And today maybe he'd be right. I mean, Maya is still used, right? And animation has gotten so much better that maybe the time would be right if it were just being introduced right now. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or possibly they use it.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you have, you've relied on trade secret, you mentioned, trademarks. How much does CoreForm do advertising at this point? Are you trying to build up a brand, or is it mainly about creating a tech product when you're in this sort of business?
We do some advertising. It's I think going to trade shows and is more effective for us at this point. We do a lot of webinars, but yeah, creating a brand absolutely matters. And I think that will be more of an emphasis up for us over the next year or two. But with T-Splines, the brand that we created, that was almost as valuable as the patent, because we were, our team synonymous with doing cutting edge, like organic design for CAD.
Mm-hmm. It was T-Splines. It was the name of the company, and that was the name of the technology. Was it coined for the technology, or was that a thing that people in academia knew existed already?
My dad invented the name, but there's splines. There's all sorts of splines. So B splines things. So T splines allowed for T junctions in the control grid. So it's a very techie name.
Because it's a term I hear all the time. So I was just wondering. But okay, and then one other question about CoreForm. So you're the chief strategy officer. I have my idea of what that entails, but what is that role?
Yeah, we just kind of created it. So I had started as the chief executive officer at CoreForm. Well, Mike was the BYU professor, and our partnership has always been that he would lead the tech and I would lead the business development. But when he was able to leave BYU, he just took on a more active role over all the operations of the company. And so, I think my main focus is on business development, growth, kind of our financial modeling. It's a pretty fun role.
Okay, nice. Yeah, forward looking. Well, so we have, let's see, Student Innovator of the Year is a big competition here on campus in the engineering school. That's, I think, their showcase is maybe next week. It's coming right up. It's the time of year when you have the business plan competitions, basically, most of them. So if you were talking to a brand new student entrepreneur who's maybe licensing from tech transfer, but maybe doing their own thing, what advice do you give to someone just starting out, having gone through it already?
I think for me, especially if this is a student, just the value of having mentors. So the first SBIR grant that my dad and I got, it was given to us conditionally in the fact that we would put together a board of directors, because they were a little bit concerned that our company consisted of my dad, all of his grad students, and his son, and they were afraid of just groupthink, or like if we would just go down an academic route. And so I was very surprised that as I reached out across the industry, that there were a lot of very accomplished professionals that were thrilled with the opportunity to be on our board of directors. And that was like the most grounding thing for me as a young CEO, was getting that broader perspective. So to the extent that especially students starting out are able to have those mentors, need those formal relationships like a board, that could just provide a really nice perspective.
Yeah. And some students will feel like, okay, I see how that would be valuable, but I don't know anyone. Like, how would they connect with the right people?
Well, the BYU network is really strong. So that, I enjoy mentoring in the BYU entrepreneurs and the Center for Entrepreneurship. They broker a lot of introductions. Some of my mentors, like going to other business plan competitions, they'll set you up with mentors. Like, that's I think one of the best parts about these types of competitions is that they naturally seem to facilitate that.
Yeah, and Mike Hendren's the director of the Rollins Center over here, doing a great job. Any student could walk in there and get connected with some people probably. Yeah. And then in terms of funding, you talked about how you got $10,000 of prize money, and you're like, oh, we could probably start a business with $10,000, But ultimately, you of course had to raise way more than that. For people who are intimidated by starting a company because of the capital needs, what's your advice? Like, how do you start learning how to raise money?
It seems like the best way. Both my companies, we've never done equity financing. It's been grants. We've got some grants from the state of Utah. If that's the route that you want to go down, Utah actually has a very strong center for teaching people how to win SBIRs. So it's in the Governor Center for Economic Development. But you just Google like Utah BYU Center. They just teach you how to do it. And so the extent that you can get that in place before you quit your day job, or if you're a student, like before you have to have a paycheck, then it makes it a lot less stressful.
And Linda Cabrals is the director there. I don't know if this will have been the case when you were doing it, but they'll actually give you a grant to go through the process of applying for a federal grant. Like they'll pay you, I don't know what it is. It might be $3,000 or something like that, just to go through the process. So if you're intimidated, at least, you'll have some funding to get you through it. So, but that's great. All right. So, last thing I wanted to ask you about is just looking forward in the future. So at some point, CoreForm will exit, or you'll get to where you're ready for your next project. Do you see yourself as looking for the next tech startup after that, or what might you do in the future, do you think?
Yeah, the fun thing about tech startups is it's just really gratifying to be able to surround yourself with like really smart people. So usually if you license tech transfer for someone, you'll have from a university, you'll have some relationship with the professor. Mm-hmm. And you'll kind of be acquainted with his reputation and what he's carved out in the industry, maybe some of the initial contacts. And that's just proven to be really, really fun for me. So some businesses, they have a defined problem they're trying to solve, and then they find technology to fill it. I've done the opposite with both of these technologies. You have a solution that you're sure will solve someone's problem, but you don't know who. And they're both are fun. And to the extent that you can find something that is like truly groundbreaking, then it just makes it a lot easier to raise money, and a lot easier to inspire people to be a part of the cause. That if you win, like life really will change for the better for a significant number of people. Like that's a pretty fun experience to have. So I could definitely, yeah, it's hard to want something else when you've had tastes.
Nice. Well, that's great. And you had mentioned earlier, these are like at CoreForm, but also T-Splines, these are high-paying jobs that you give to people. I always tell people that most job creation in the U.S., almost all of it comes from startup companies. But one thing that's special about tech transfer is, or just high-tech technologies generally, is that these are high-paying jobs. Like these are PhDs working for you, which is pretty great. And then, like you say, how can you even measure the success of the products that you've launched? Like T-Splines, how many products have been built better because of them? Like incalculable, right?
Yeah, no, it is super fun so now since you sold the Autodesk, that's in the hands of millions of people now with Autodesk Fusion 360. And so I can go to the store, and I'm in touch with some of the designers that use it. And we bought presents for my kids that were those kind of toys, or you see a car or Nike shoes that were used to set a new world record. And it's really cool to have been like a very small part of that.
Well, great. And you've still got probably many companies ahead of you. So it'll be exciting to see what you do, Matt. And thanks so much for being willing to come on the podcast today. Super interesting what you've accomplished, and just a great example of how tech transfer can work out there.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dave. I appreciate our interactions, and yeah, anyone that's watching, it's just fun to be able to give back when you've gone through these experiences. So I'd welcome anyone reaching out with any questions as they go through tech transfer as well.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Matt. Appreciate it. And we'll be back with another episode next week.